Estate Show with Pat Lopez, where we talk everything real estate. Today, my guest is Russell Kubach of Honest Real Estate. Russell, welcome to the show.
Pat, appreciate you having me. Always good to see you.
Perfect. Okay, so I always start off the show by asking, how did you get started in real estate?
So I spent a long time in the beer business, not in the glamorous side. I was in the operations management end of it. So I didn't get all the sales trips, glitz and glamour and all that. But I ended up my last position as a director of operations for one of the larger wholesalers on the East Coast. So I basically helped with the sales, service, and distribution of some of the biggest beer brands in the world, almost everything except for Budweiser. My last post, my last position, I worked for a family business. With family business comes family problems. So no matter your skill set or what you bring to the table, you're dealing with a lot of behind-the-scene politics, and I saw that the end was near. So I got my insurance license because I had a financial advisor friend. We started doing business together. I was doing that on the side. It started to grow a little bit. The family problems with the company just kind of wore on me a little bit. It was taking too much of my time. I have a 7-year-old son now. At the time, he was very young. I have a teenage daughter. She was younger. And I just was really removed. So I took a leap. I never thought I'd leave the beer business. I jumped and I started doing insurance full time. After a couple months of doing that, I realized that when I'm sitting and I'm meeting with people and I'm talking about their immediate plans, most of the time they're talking about buying a house. So there I am making a few hundred, if maybe $1,000 off of them, and I'm referring out a few $1,000s. So, and I had so many people sitting in front of me that were talking about buying a house. I'm like, I know too many people in this business. I've got to make this jump. I've got to look into it. During a down period, right before COVID, I went and got licensed.
Okay, great. And then, so 2020 or 19?
19.
19. Okay, great. Okay, so now you're with Honest Real Estate. How did you end up with them?
So I was a bit of a broker jumper. You got a lot of brokers that are good people, but unfortunately their business model is overpromise, underdeliver. So I made the rounds. I recognized Honest, and I knew a lot of agents there. I knew of Honest in certain areas that I traveled in, and my partner, Sheena Dudek, had known Ed on a personal level.
Okay.
She spoke very highly. I asked around a little bit. Nobody had anything bad to say about Ed, which was surprising because you're dealing with broker after broker, and somebody's always got something negative to say, whether it be stupid or, inconsequential, doesn't matter. Somebody's always got something negative. Nobody said anything negative about Ed. Sheena and I met with him. A couple of weeks later, it was time for me to go, leaving the last brokerage I was at. I called Ed up and said, I'm ready. And he went, you coming in to sign paperwork or you coming in to talk again? I went, nope, get the paperwork ready. We're good to go. A few months later, my partner, Sheena, she came over as well. And it's been probably the best decision I've made in real estate so far.
Perfect. Okay, so what does your book of business look like? Do you deal with buyers, sellers, evenly?
I'm heavier on the seller side.
Okay.
I do deal with a decent amount of buyers, but I'm definitely heavier on the seller side.
Okay, great. Now, how did you get into the seller side? Because a lot of times when people are starting out in the business, they tend to go more on the buyer side.
So it just kind of took a natural trajectory in that direction. I did a lot of mailers. I did a lot of social media. I followed up with my insurance book of business and just kept hammering that home, and it just worked out. And then once you start rolling where people are seeing that you're selling houses, and once COVID ended, we could get back in business. Right. I mean, you could have put a cardboard box up with a $200,000 sale price and somebody would have bought it in 15 minutes. So I got a lot of traction that way because, I had a lot of referrals, people coming in, people I worked with in the beer business. So it worked in my favor. And then I guess just people saw that I was moving them pretty quickly. So the seller side, it just worked out that way. But that doesn't mean that the buyers weren't there. And I've got a lot of buyers coming out now, especially just because you're seeing people talk about they don't have the finances. They see the home prices are still holding up pretty strongly. They see the interest rates and they're all scared. But then once you have a conversation about the opportunity that, hey, look, you can save some money. You can buy down your points. You can get grant money to help out. That's kind of changing their perspective, and it's a paradigm shift.
Okay, great. Okay, so very interesting story. Now, what I wanted the podcast to be about, because we were at an event and the speaker at the event mentioned, how many people have, buyer presentations, and that all to do with, the class action lawsuit and all that kind of thing. So you raised your hand and I thought, interesting. So what does your buyer presentation look like, and what are your steps when you do that? Like, because you're supposed to meet with somebody first, and I think you always had to, and get that buyer agency contract signed. But what does that look like, and what is your focus when you're talking to a buyer?
Education. You'll deal with people that have never bought a house or haven't bought a house in 10, 20 years, and things have changed so much since they first bought a house, or they're completely clueless.
Right.
So the number one goal is to educate them what the whole process is. Sit them down, let them know where they got to start, get some criteria as to what they're looking for. So when I go and I meet with, or when I start talking to somebody and they come out of the woodwork or call me or text me, whatever, I like to try and meet either with a place that they're comfortable, a coffee, or bring them to the office. A lot of my buyers are fairly local, looking to move into the suburbs. So we have a location in Northeast Philadelphia. We have a location in Bridesburg. So I like to bring them into one of those offices, just kind of, sit them down, close the door, cards on the table, be realistic as possible. I give them a list, tell me everything you're looking for in a house. I explain step by step where we are in the process. I explain what the steps are so that you're not getting a phone call, like I got last Monday. I got a seller that I explained the entire process. Right. What is an appraisal? Well, we covered this.
Right.
And here is everything that I showed you with that seller's packet where we're going over that process. So it's always a good reference to go back and say, hey, we talked about this. Here's what it is. If you want to read a little bit more, here's the packet or look at the packet I delivered. It's on this page. And people come back and they'll feel a little bit more comfortable with it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. So before you have that meeting, do you send that package out? Is it digital or no?
No, I prefer to go over it in person. I've always been a bit of an in-person visual learner, and I like to do that in person with the people that I work with. It helps me when I do it too, because I'll take notes as well. You'll notice their reactions, their mannerisms, right. Whether they look confused or whether they look scared or whether they're just very, very excited. Because you got to curb that as well too. You don't want anybody who, is window shopping and then, next thing you know, they get really aggressive. They want something and there's buyer's remorse. You want to tame that, and you want to keep them as realistic as possible. I'm sure you deal with it as well, where you get a pre-approval and next thing you know, the agent, the pre-approval limit is X, Y, and Z, right. But the buyer is now looking at $10,000 to $15,000, $20,000 over it. And then when you got to run the numbers, they go, oh, well, I didn't want to spend that every month.
Right.
Well, you don't want to be house poor. So let's be realistic. And, my method of communication is always what you need to hear versus what you want to hear. I don't ever want to have somebody come down the line or talk about me that, oh, well, he made it seem like this was possible. Like, I want to be realistic. I want to make sure that you're not in a position after your purchase that you have buyer's remorse or you resent me for putting you in a position where maybe it's you bit off more than you can chew. So let's look at what is realistic, what you're comfortable with. I'm working with Bill, working with the team here. We've had a lot of positive conversations with the buyers that I've had where we've kept them in a realistic and comfortable price point where their spend is not going to put them in a tough spot.
Right.
And I think that value goes a long way where you've got that, that tandem working, the lender and the agent.
Okay. So is there a super common question that you get like with buyers that they always ask, or is it just a mixed bag?
It's usually a mixed bag. I mean, depending on who what their experience level is, depending who they are, what their focus is, because some people have a significant amount of money to put down, so their payment can be lower. Some of them are just more concerned with what the house looks like, what it'll appraise for, or any other thing that is important to them. But right. Mainly it's, what is my monthly payment going to look like?
It always
everybody cares about the bottom line, right?
What's it going to cost me and how much money do I need to pay?
Exactly.
Right? Okay, so as far as your session, because you want to meet with them, how long does it take you to go through there? Because you have a list of, I guess, like definitions, terms, what's a pre-approval, what is an appraisal, what's title, you explain all that information. So how long does that,
I mean, it varies, to be honest with you. I mean, if it's somebody cold coming in off the street that I really don't have a relationship with, it could take anywhere from a half hour to an hour. You don't want to rush it. You want to give them their time. But if it's somebody that you have a relationship or or it's a friend or something like that, I mean, you could change the entire environment, and that could be a 3-hour session because you didn't go to get coffee, you went something, grabbed something to eat, and it turned into a beer or two, and then, but nonetheless, you want everybody to leave with the same level of knowledge, regardless of how long it is. You want to be as informative as possible. And I think that over the years I've put together, and I've edited it, it's been a living document. I've constantly, with things that go on in the market, I'm constantly updating it. But I think it's very informative at this point. A lot of visuals too. So, I think anybody that I sit with leaves confident and with a full understanding.
Now, what kind of feedback do you get? Like after it's all said and done, do people come back to you say, hey, the process was smooth. There was no surprises. You explained everything up front. I can't believe how simple this was. Or, like what kind of feedback are you getting?
It's usually, you were right about everything. And I'm not saying that to be pompous. I'm saying that because when I do communicate, it's, hey, this is what goes on. Here's what could happen if we don't do X, Y, and Z. We need to make sure that our ducks in a row to prevent that. And if they don't, and, sometimes people will miss a document, people will miss something, whatever the case may be, there is that conversation that we've had. And I like to follow up with, text messages on occasion where I feel like somebody's not understanding and, just kind of reiterate it so that that's there and it's a reference point. But for the most part, it's usually been, look, you were dead on with that. You were right. You sat there, you told me exactly what could happen. It did happen and we got through it. You told me how to get through it and that was it. So it's really straightforward and understanding.
Okay. Last question. With the upcoming lawsuit, whenever this is going to go into effect, if it goes into effect, everything is still, up in the air, but we know change is coming. Are you getting a lot of questions? It could be from buyers, sellers, it doesn't matter, on the topic itself, or very little?
So I've had it come up less than a handful of times so far. And that could be because it's been pushed. It could be because people aren't paying attention. But somebody brought it up. It was a client of mine. We bought his house last year. He brought it up and just kind of asked me what was going on. And I said, we'll see. There's still a lot of pieces that are in play. But, you bring that up, and Saturday I'm at an event, working it, and I'm walking out of the office in Bridesburg with this canopy tent to post. And this little old woman walking her dog comes up, and our office is closed. She goes, "Are you open?" I went, "I'm open if you needed to be."
24/7.
Her dog was elderly, couldn't come up the steps, chubby, gray dog. So we sat in the bench outside. A little bit of drizzle. And one of the first things she asked was, "What do you think's going to happen this summer with the NAR settlement?" I went, "Well, again, there's still a lot of pieces in play." And then we started to go over, the commissions and things like that. And, we started to talk about whether or not somebody, the interpretation that maybe a buyer's commission would have to be negotiated from the buyer and paid by them, and all the different variables that everybody's speculating. Then I explained to her about, hey, look, if you don't offer a buyer's commission out of that split, which most seller's agent will do because they want to sell the house, it may sit. We look at a lot of these discount brokerages, and, what she was referencing is, I got to go over her house this afternoon and take a look at it. She wants a comp. Right. She's thinking about selling. So I told her that if it's one of these negotiated settlements or a buyer has to pay it, you could really disenfranchise a huge segment of home buyers. That divide, where somebody barely has enough money, has exhausted all the grant money or down payment programs. You're going to put somebody at a real disadvantage where home ownership may not be possible. And her eyes kind of lit up because, this woman lives in Bridesburg. On the other side of Aramingo Ave, there are some lower income individuals and people that she's familiar with and that she knows. And she even referenced some of her family. So I said, people who sell and that there's not a buyer's commission negotiated where they're trying to pay, or if it's even low, that home could sit. Let's be realistic. If it says 1% and, look, people can get mad at me. if it says 1%, there's a lot of agents that won't show it because there's one down the block that says 2.5.
Right, right. Now, that's steering, and they're not supposed to do that.
I realize
Right.
that.
But yeah, but the bigger issue, I believe, is the affordability. Ultimately, it may not be, the agent would be more than happy to show the home.
Yeah.
But the problem is now when you turn around and you say, okay, it's 1% or 0%. Now you have to pay me the $5,000, $6,000, $7,000.
Yeah.
They just don't have the money.
Absolutely.
So they're going to what's the word? Say, hey, don't show me any properties that don't have a commission because I don't have the money. I can't pay for it.
Yeah.
And I want representation.
Sure.
I have to have representation. I need it, and I just don't, have the money to compensate. So, so I would think it could be more the buyer saying, just like if it's a house, hey, my max is 200,000. Don't show me a house at 250. There's no difference. If you can't afford it, you can't afford it. So, yeah, without question, that's going to be an issue. I mean, the ultimate game is I want as many people, as many eyeballs, as many people to look at my house if I'm selling it to guarantee that I get the highest price. And if you limit how many people that can go and see that house because they, about affordability.
Absolutely.
The issue is the issue, with that. So, yeah, and I do agree. I think, especially if you're in a first-time home buyer market, I think most sellers are going to give the commission. They have to.
Yeah. I mean,
there's no other way around it.
I mean, look, people have to make a living, and this is the way it's always been. It's been the seller and the agent negotiate that commission, and they split it how they see fit, and that right down the middle, that 50-50 is ideal for everybody.
Right. Right.
At least in my opinion.
Right, in your opinion. Right. So it's really interesting. It's going to be fascinating, how it all shakes out. Nobody knows a year from now. We'll have a better idea and a better picture of how everything shakes out. But yeah, 100%. The first-time home buyers, they're the ones that are going to really have issues because one of the biggest issues is affordability and enough money to get into the home. Those are the two things which you have. But interesting, you were walking out of the office, a little lady.
I just totally unsuspecting. I had no idea that I was going to sit outside on a bench and talk about that.
Right. Okay, great. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, they want to know more about you, if they have a house that they want to sell or they're a buyer, how would they do that?
They can contact me, text, call 215-290-0559, or go to my website, russellkubachrealtor.com, or stop by any of the Honest offices, specifically the Bridesburg one at 2582 Orthodox Street, and that's Philly, PA 19137.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for being on the show. I really wanted to talk about that, buyer agency, and yeah, I think that education, and I think a lot of this lawsuit is really going to help or make realtors be better. Educate the buyers.
Yes.
Those kind of things. The more knowledge, more information that's out there, the better for everybody. So
exactly.
Yeah. So once again, thanks a lot. That's the Real Estate Show with Pat Lopez, where we talk everything real estate. Be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe below. Super important. Also, leave me a comment. Tell me some show topics you'd like me to cover in the future. This show is everything real estate, no limits. Hope you enjoyed the show.